Today's guest is Maria Weaver, a transformational leader who has spent her life moving through worlds of media, music, and technology with equal parts of courage and heart. Maria has led at the highest levels, from reshaping global marketing and advertising at Comcast to serving as global president of WMX at Warner Music Group, to now guiding founders and creators as a managing director at Oaklands. What I love about Maria is that she leads with a deep sense of purpose. She lifts voices that often go unheard, builds cultures where people feel seen, and brings a spirit of abundance into rooms that desperately need it. She's someone who understands that growth begins within, that disruption can be a creative force, and that leadership, at its best, is an act of generosity. I can't wait for you to meet her. Please enjoy my time with Maria Weaver. Hey, y'all. Let's go there. Okay, Maria Weaver, the beautiful Maria Weaver is here.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad we're finally doing this. Yeah. Okay, so I always like to begin by talking about the context of how we know one another. We met through the amazing Lindsay Shookus,
Yes.
and we went on a Mira trip together, which was amazing. I was totally blown away by the trip, but mostly because of the amazing group of women that we were with.
Same. Same. I mean, I think for me, there were 2 key components. One was that my mom had just passed.
Yeah,
So I was, in an emotionally kind of raw place,
yeah,
and to be someplace where I didn't know most of the women was very vulnerable for me, and I always describe it to people as one of the best experiences I've ever had, and, like, the women, oh my gosh, all of you, like, every single woman that was on the trip is, like, incredible, and so many have become good friends, and it's just something like, oh my gosh, I just cherish it when I think about it, and so, yeah, that's how we met. I mean, it's pretty incredible that that's how we met. It was,
yeah.
like, in Mexico on a
It was
trip.
it was so powerful, and you were
Yeah,
so openly grieving, but in a really beautiful way.
yeah.
Um, your beautiful friend Kim was there at your side supporting you. Shout out to Lindsay and Kristen and Katie who made the trip possible. But
Yeah,
yeah, this soulful group of women, I'm so envious because you all mostly live together in the city and get to
many
see
of
one
us.
another. And yeah, many, not everyone, but and y'all recently got together and I was super envious. I really wanted to be there, but I have a feeling we're all going to stay connected. Like this is a
Oh, for sure.
yeah,
Like, there is a super connection now, and it's so funny that you bring up my good friend Kim, who was on the trip as well, because, when you're really close with someone, you think you know everything about them, and there were things on the trip that I learned that I never knew before, which, was kind of amazing that you can be in that environment, and because of that environment, like, learn something about someone that you feel super close to that's very, like, personal and private for them that they just hadn't shared. It just goes to show that, with the space we were in, that people felt so comfortable to share so much. It was really, yeah, it was awesome. It was
yeah.
so special.
It was a very healing trip. And
It
that
was.
Kim is full of surprises. Talk about somebody who's super talented.
Yeah.
Her paintings are incredible.
Yes, for sure.
Um, okay, so you brought up your mom, which is actually where I wanted to begin. I want to
Oh,
honor her since she was
thank
part
you.
of how we met in a way. I felt her presence when we were all together.
Mhm.
Can you spend some time talking about your mom?
Sure. So um, my mom was a very complicated person, primarily because of her upbringing just was not easy. And so I think because of that, for her as a mom, it, there was a lot of evolution for her, right? Like I can remember being very young, and my mother was not a hugger. She didn't get hugged as a child. She
Mm,
wasn't a hugger, and by the time she passed, she was a huge hugger. Like, we would hug all the time,
mm,
and I loved watching her, evolve and grow, and, like, be willing to be vulnerable with me, her child, and she was so feisty when she was, when I was young, and she became so soft. It just is really interesting, I think, to watch someone, like, grow older, right? And she would share with me that it was so interesting and complicated and hard for her to not be able to do the things she used to do, and how weird that is to, like, actually see yourself or feel yourself, deteriorating is what she would say, and that was, hard, but, my mom was an artist, she was a painter and a sculptor, and so there was, visible kind of changes for her when she couldn't hold her pens the same way, and she couldn't create in the same way. But when I think about my mom, as hard as some days still are, because I do miss her so much,
Yeah.
um, I literally I have no regrets, and that is so profound for me. Like, I got to tell her everything I would wanna say to her. We would have so many, like, deep and intimate conversations. I love who she was with my daughters. I have 2 daughters, and they're both artists because of her. They both love to paint and draw and express themselves through art, and it's absolutely because of her. It skipped a generation. I can't paint, but I
Creative.
I can do other kinds of creative things. That's just not one of them. And, yeah, just a special lady. It was also really interesting. There was a long gap of time between when she passed, which was January, and when we actually had her memorial, which was the end of May, because I wanted to do it as an art exhibit and show her work, and so that all takes time. And that also gave time for people to share stories with me, and just the impact my mom had on some of my friends that I had, like, no idea, because of her openness and willingness to bring in, some of my friends into our home if they were going through challenges with their own parents, or, I was in high school at the heart of, or the beginning, I should say, of HIV. And as a person in the theater, I knew a lot of people who were impacted, and my mother would open our home. It just was so interesting just to know, like, not only did she impact, myself and my siblings, but the impact she had on just others that she, touched. So, yeah, thanks for letting me honor her. She's such a beautiful soul, and she's absolutely with me every day. She's here with me right now.
Yeah. Okay, and then let's honor her. What's her name, Maria?
Carol Maria Weaver.
Carol Maria.
Yeah.
Okay, what changed? I just wanna touch on this. What changed in the relationship? Do you remember? Because you said that she was feisty and then she softened and your relationship with her changed.
I think seeing her as a grandmother, like, seeing her with my
Mm,
children, really, and me becoming a mom, right?
mm,
Like, the the understanding you have of how parents make decisions along the way was became clearer to me, and then just seeing how she was with my children was way softer than she was with myself and my siblings. And I think her just acknowledging, right, like, I can't do what I used to be able to do, when she went from, being able to just walk around New York City, fine, to needing a walker. Like, her physical changes, just made me wanna help her, right? And so that, I remember one of her text to me was thanking me for helping her home one day. Like, we had been out, and then, usually before she had a walker, she'd get on the bus and go home. And I was like, no, 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 I'll go home with you. And she sent me a text, this long text, like, thanking me for not making her feel weak, for helping her without making her feel weak. And so she was just, she was very emotional in that way, and I was like, "Oh, well, I would never wanna make you feel weak," right? But it just made our relationship so, different in how we would speak to one another, and me, of course, acknowledging, I, would never want you to feel weak, mom. You're the same strong mom I always had, and, you're just because you have a walker doesn't make you weak, right? And so that reassurance I needed to give to her versus, her previously always being the person to reassure me. And so, I could literally see the change in our relationship, right? Like, because I could see the change in her, and she was just very vulnerable about it. Like, it didn't, I mean, there were certain things that my mom was still not, okay with, right? Like, I remember trying to get her to wear one of the life alert things that,
Oh god,
in case she
the "I've
fell.
fallen and I can't get up" thing.
I've fallen, I can't get up was not like she was, I don't need that. I don't, like, so we tried that. We tried the watch. Like, so there was still like some aspects that she was like, I have to draw the line somewhere.
She had her boundaries.
She had her boundaries, and I could respect that. I was like, but I always was trying to make her feel like this isn't about you, mom. This is about me. This is about
Mhm.
me wanting to, be able to get to you quickly if something's happened, right? Like I had to kind of try my best to play mind games, but it just, so while she was vulnerable and willing to like be open to some level of help, there were definitely boundaries. I mean, she lived on her own. She was, almost 89 years old, and she lived on her own throughout the whole time. I mean, she passed away
That's
in her
amazing.
home, and that was just the way she wanted it. Like,
Yeah,
she didn't, wanna go into a facility, and, those were things that were important to her, and if I could support that as long as she was safe, was how I thought about it, and so, for me, I was like, "Those little things help you be able to stay in this apartment by yourself."
yeah. Well, I'd love to see Carol's art at some point if you would share that
Yes.
with me. And I also aspire to have that sort of relationship with my aging parents and with my own children. So I find it very inspirational to hear the sort of warmth and care that you had for your mom and that you have for your mom.
I do.
I'm curious, were you still operating when she was starting to decline? And how were you able to support her? Because you were in a big job.
So the decline was slow, if you will. I was 100% still operating. Like I never was in a position where I needed to like leave my job and take care of my mom or anything like that. Like it was gradual, slow, and a month or two before my mom passed, she was still going to the grocery store on her own. So this
Yeah.
wasn't like
Yeah.
she was still very, very not I wouldn't say very, very active. That's probably too strong, but she was active enough to like go to the grocery store. She would text me and say, "Do you need anything?" I'm on my way to Whole Foods, right? And so I didn't have to leave my job for her. I did have someone who went in and spent time with her. Funny enough, it's the same woman. Her name is Mariana. I um I am indebted to her probably for my entire life because she was my nanny for Alexa and Haley. And then so my mom knew her, and as my mom was getting older, I just said, "Mom, is this even if it's just someone to keep you company a couple of days a week, or just go with you to the supermarket a couple of days a week." And Mariana was the only person she would approve, like literally, she didn't want anyone. But when I said, "What about Mariana?" and she said, "Yes, I like Mariana. She can come." And so Mariana would go and be with my mom. And if there was anything I needed to know, like if she was concerned about something, or she would, text me, call me. And so at least I had some eyes on her on a fairly regular basis. But yes, I was able to, operate in my quote unquote big job. Yeah, the whole time.
That's beautiful that that worked out for you. I actually, served on a board with a woman, that was the CEO of United Healthcare, and
Mm,
she, when she retired, did a study on aging in place and the benefits of aging in place, and she
yes.
did something very similar when her father was in his 90s and her mom had passed away. Their housekeeper was aging, and so she actually moved the housekeeper in to the house
Right.
part of her retirement. She
Right.
had free room and board, and then she was, a second eyes and ears. And then she actually hired a separate housekeeper, but she would make meals and spend time with her dad. And so it was like she did something very similar. There was somebody that was already in their life where
Yeah.
their life was transitioning. It was like a natural transition for her too. So it's quite beautiful that that worked out.
I think it makes such a difference if you can do it, right? Like I know it doesn't work that
True.
way for everyone, and I feel blessed that, my job didn't make me move out of New York, and I could be here in the city, and she could stay in her home, and Mariana said yes and was able to, work it into her schedule. And yeah, I think it's the reason my mom was able to live until she was 89. Like I really I do believe that because She was surrounded by her art. She was surrounded by everything that was important to her, and able to go outside, able to see her neighbors. She had lived in that building for 57 years, and, the neighbors, a lot of the same people have been there for the same amount of time, and so just being in that familiar environment, yeah, I know the privilege that I had to be able to do that. Are your parents close by you? Do they
They
live near?
are. We actually moved them to Austin from Dallas in
Mhm.
2016. I'm grateful for that. Yeah, and so they're close by. And yeah, these are all things we're thinking about and talking about now in terms of what
Yeah,
they want this phase of life to look like. And to your point, what can we do to honor it? And it's a challenge economically. There's all sorts of considerations, but we're walking through that now.
yeah,
Um,
not
okay,
easy.
I want to focus on you.
Yes, okay.
Okay. So Maria, how would you describe yourself out in the world? Because you're kind of multi hyphenate now. You've got some plates spinning in the air right now.
I
Um, when
do.
I met you, we had similar stories. We didn't realize it till we sat together at dinner and we were like, wait a minute, what? And so we had similar stories and experiences in our career. But I want you to describe kind of who you are in the world now, and then we'll spend some time talking about how that came to be.
It's so interesting. That question is, it's something I think about a lot because for years, actually, if you would have asked me this question just 2 years ago, I would have probably started with my title,
Yeah.
and then I would have said, and I'm a mom, right? And I'm a sister, and with like all these labels, right? And it's been through this process of, leaving Warner and taking some time and really, soul searching, that how I describe and think about myself now is I just start with the fact that I'm a human and I am, flawed, but growing and evolving every day. And my goal every day is to be better tomorrow than I was yesterday. It's like, it's not about all the labels. It's like, who am I as a person? And how do I want to show up in the world? And what do I value? And what's important to me is how I think about myself every single day. And so whether I'm on, speaking on a podcast with a friend or, texting with my daughter who's asking me for some advice, it's less about, okay, right now I have to be the best mom I can be, right? Like it's it's much more from a human standpoint. And that evolution, I think, is the reason why I can have so many plates spinning because I'm not striving for perfection within a label,
Yeah. Oh
if
my
that
god.
makes sense.
Oh my god, it resonates so much, and if anything, like, I can also as you're talking, I'm, like, thinking through the dismantling of that. Like, early in my career, not only would I introduce myself with my title, but if you asked me how I was doing, it was based on how the quarter was performing. It was, like, that bad. And then
Right?
there was the dismantling of the identity where I would introduce myself as my former title, which, a girlfriend and I have a running joke. We always say, "Do you know who I was?"
Right.
Not, "Do you know
Right.
who I am?" "Do you know who I was?" So, I can so relate to what you're saying, and I love that you said I'm human and I'm flawed because I always say I'm a deeply flawed human, and that's what I love.
Oh my
That's what
gosh.
drives connection. Like, I love to know people's flaws and there's no bad parts. I wanna know everything about everyone.
That's right.
But what I wanna understand from you is what did that process look like? Because from my own experience, it wasn't overnight. It's a process to let go of that identity, and it comes for me, it came with a dark night of the soul, like a total identity crisis. Where were you? Tell us a little bit about your time at Warner, and what was that dismantling of title and attachment to labels like? How did
Yeah.
you dismantle that?
So I don't think it was quite as profound as a dark night of the soul for me. I've had a dark night of the soul. I don't know that that was this time, but it was okay. So I was at Warner, and my role was president of a division within Warner that ran a part of the business that was outside of music, right? So everything from merchandise, touring, brand partnerships, a media business, etc. And I had spent several years building, creating and building that division, if you will.
Mhm.
Some of the pieces were already there. They had acquired some businesses, but it wasn't in a structure, if you will. So they hired me to do that work. And it was definitely roll up your sleeves, get in there kind of work. And also very gratifying and exciting and interesting in a lot of different ways because it was different than my TV and film background. And loved the senior team I had put together, and we were all in it together. And a new CEO joined the company and had a different philosophy. His philosophy is really around doubling down on technology, or it might have evolved since then, but doubling down on technology for the artists versus the ancillary revenue streams around the artists,
Mhm.
right? And it was the first time that I was in a scenario where the part of the business that I was responsible for, that I was running and putting my time and energy was no longer valued by the company,
Hmm.
right? Like it was the first time I had ever experienced that. And it took me a minute to even realize that that's what was happening, right? Like kept trying to build decks and show value and show more value. And we were working on the weekends and the whole team and my former CFO, Nancy, was like a godsend. And she was in it in the trenches with me. And we were just trying to show how this was so important and just really pushing against a tide that just wasn't going to shift because he came in with a mindset and he's a new CEO and he has a right to that mindset. And I'm trying to convince him to have a different mindset, right? Like it's just, and so there was a breakfast. I remember this very, very well. It was a breakfast I was attending. It was at Meta. I had been invited by my friend Alvin, and I was sitting there at a table of women, and there was a woman on the stage who it was a paraphrase of what I now know is a more famous quote, but she was just talking about as women how we get into a mode where um, we just say yes to everything and anything in these corporate environments because we want so much to not be difficult and to not be challenging and to you know show we're team players and like trying so hard to combat all of the labels that have been put out there about female executives, right? So we just say yes, and that's what I was doing. Yes, I'll show another way. I'll show this, in a new way. And she said, if you're not careful, they will kill you slowly,
Oof.
and then they will tell you that you liked it.
Oh, fuck.
And Carla, I turned to my friend, uh, colleague, someone I adore who knew very little about what was going on. And I turned to her and I said, Danielle, that's what they're doing. They're trying to kill me. They are trying to kill me slowly. And then they're going to tell me that I like it. And I can't do it. And I literally left the breakfast. I had to like text my friend Alvin later and apologize. I just got up, I put on my stuff, and I was like, that's it. That's me. That is me. They are killing me slowly.
So what did you do?
So I went to not the CEO at the time, but my former boss, the person who had originally hired me, because I was hired by one CEO and then the new CEO, right? And I told him the story. I went straight to his office. I still had my coat on. I had my bags in my hands, and I knocked on his door and I told him the story. And he knew it was going down a slippery slope, right? It
Yeah.
was a question of like, was I going to quit? Are they going to, just shut my division down and let me go? Like, who knows? It was all like a matter of timing, truthfully, right? Like it was all the writing was on the walls that this, like everything I was trying was just not going to work.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so we negotiated for me to leave. I mean, it was that part of it was pretty painless, but I think I knew that when I left, I needed to take a beat.
Yeah.
because it had been so intense for, I guess some people can go through something like this for years. For me, it was like 6 months, right? So it wasn't like years, it was, 6 months at the most. But it was the first time that I had been in that scenario. I I've been the leader where I've had divisions that I'm like, "This division has to go,"
Yeah.
and now it was on me.
Yeah. If you've never been on the other side of it and suddenly you're quote unquote irrelevant, it catches you totally off guard. So what about okay, so I have a friend who's going through this exact situation right now,
Yeah.
and she is terrified of losing the income, which I think is common for a lot of us that are breadwinners.
Mhm.
Um, what advice would you give to her, Maria?
Well, I mean, in full transparency, I had a contract.
Yeah.
So, and the changing of the job gave me some outs, right? So there are a lot it's not exactly, and that is something that I've, you know, needed to clarify for people, right? I didn't just wake up one day and like, quit my job, right? Like I had a safety net, right? And so what I would say in the case of, being scared of losing your income, I mean, I do think I know it's a really tough job market. Like I get that, but I do, I think you should be trying to get out, right? It's like trying to find a job as best you can, and stashing as much as you can, right? Saving as much as you can. Like you might have to just not, do some of the things you normally do. That way, you give yourself a bit of that cushion and that safety net, so that if you feel like you really can't take it anymore and you have to go, that you're able to sustain yourself. But yes, I mean, I'm a single mom, right? So I'm the sole breadwinner, and it's, scary. Like, it is scary, right? Like, you're in a scenario where it's all on you, right? And you have to figure this out, and you're at the same time, licking your wounds a bit, right? Because you've just gone through this scenario where you're, like you said, irrelevant. The work you're doing is not considered important. It's a moment that you have to, like, okay, I will it's almost like, to some degree, I have to deal with that later, because right now I also need to figure out, like, how am I gonna take care of my family, right? And, so yes, my heart goes out to anyone in that situation, and if you don't have the ability to negotiate yourself out, which, even without a contract, I mean, sometimes, some companies, like, they understand that, what you're going through is, like, not a great scenario, and especially if the end is gonna come at some point in time, you can have that conversation and say, "What can you guys do for me? Like, this is not okay, and, is there a way that you can give me some cushion?"
Yeah. There's a couple things that I feel are worth mentioning because we do have a significant contingency of our audience that are executives. And I think it's important to mention that negotiating your way in to a job is super important because
100%,
how you negotiate in does dictate how you leave, whether you're leaving on your terms or theirs.
100%.
And I'm always surprised when I hire executives how few women actually negotiate in, whether that's advocating for the compensation or actually hiring an attorney to review the contracts or asking about things like change of control, versus men. So I think, just in life, negotiating in is just as important as negotiating out. I just want to call that out. There's also something else that you said around saying yes all of the time. I feel compelled to share this story. I had a woman reach out to me and she was like, Carla, I think I'm being pushed out of my job. And I said to her, okay, what if this wasn't happening? What would you want? And she was like, well, I'd want this job and I want this to happen at this company. And she kind of like suddenly it became clear. So when she went back to her boss, who was the CEO of the company, she was like, this is what I want. If this guy's going to push me out, he can have my job and report to me while you help me find my next thing. And I was like, "Damn, that is such a power move." She didn't
Yes.
say yes. She was like It was more of a yes and. Okay, if you want me out of here, this is what I need. And it was like, damn, it was such a strong move and such a strong lesson to me in terms of like whether or not we accept somebody else's reality as our own.
That's right.
And so I love this notion of not always saying yes.
It takes a lot of guts to get to that place because I think we all have been conditioned to some degree that, when we don't say yes, we're perceived as being difficult, right? And so I think getting to that place where it's not about am I being difficult or not being difficult. It's about boundaries and just knowing your worth,
Yeah.
knowing what you bring to the table, and also, not taking it quite so personally, right? Like I really also needed to get to a place where this is not about Maria, right? Like this isn't about Maria Weaver. This is a strategic decision. He's a new CEO and he's making a strategic decision about the business, right? And me trying to convince him is personal, right? Like it's about, and it was almost less about me trying to save my job, truthfully. It was really about trying to save the division. Like these were people that I had, come to know and love. And like the thought of laying all of them off or shutting down division, like it was just very painful to think about that, right? People whose personal scenarios I might know. And but you have to take the personal out of it to some degree, right? It's not Maria Weaver who's irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's right?
It's the division, and there's real heartbreak in that, it's hard not to be heartbroken when that happens, but it does
Yeah.
happen. I think the other thing I'm hearing you say, Maria, which is you have to look for the win-win in it. Any great
Yes.
negotiation, both sides win,
Yeah.
so it's also about like, okay, if this is what you want, how do we make this happen in a way that works for both of us?
Yes.
Um, okay, so I wanna talk about this is a big deal that you reach this level. I mean, a president at Warner Music of a division, a woman of color, there are going to be people that are listening to this that are like, "How? How did she do that? How did she achieve that?" Will you tell us a little bit about your career and how that came to be, how you reached the levels that you did?
Sure. I do think it's such an interesting question because it's true that there's a real ceiling at like SVP, EVP to like getting over that hump. It's
Mhm,
not it's not fictional, like it's very real. It's not easy. Um my career I started off in media, television, sports channel working for the division doesn't exist anymore. It's called Rainbow Advertising, a division of Cablevision. And because it was sports, it was predominantly, especially then, men, right? I know there weren't really as many females in sports as there are now. And I learned a lot of really valuable lessons during that time about, asking for what you want, using your voice, advocating for yourself. Like, my boss, I reported to the CFO, which was kind of odd and interesting for marketing to report into. I started as a sales assistant and then started leading marketing for them. But he would always, if I went in and told him about a scenario, he'd say, well, go back and tell them X, Y, and Z. I'm like, you want me to go back and tell them? Yeah, go back and tell them.
and
And
how old were you at this time, Maria? Like, give us
mm,
a
in
age and
like my
stage.
early 20s,
Yeah,
24,
yeah,
and he's telling me to go back and say that to some 40-year-old, 40 something year old white male,
yeah,
right? Um, And so it was great training ground for me. Like that rainbow advertising, probably in today's day would be considered toxic, right? It was like basically like working in a locker room for sure.
mhm.
Um, but there was just so many lessons in it. And so I think through every phase and stage, of my career, I've taken the nuggets and the nuances of the people around me, the leaders who I liked the way they led, and the nuances of from leaders who I didn't,
Yeah,
right? And it helped shape my leadership style, and it helped shape how I wanted to evolve and grow in my career. But I think more than anything, I raised my hand a lot, right? I said, it goes back to the saying yes, but it wasn't necessarily I wasn't thinking of it as saying yes. It was just I wanted to evolve and grow. Went from Rainbow to this small little startup. Um, it was this guy Shelly Finkel, who, if people know like old boxing era, they're probably like Shelly Finkel. She worked for Shelly Finkel. He was like Evander Holyfield's manager, like way back in the day. And he had this small little startup with a bunch of sports licenses that he had acquired, and, he literally just wanted to build this company, take it public, and sell it. And, it was a handful of us that joined him in that endeavor. And that was great, right? Because it was a startup, we went public, so, helping take a company public, all those things, and I was under 30, right? Like,
Wow.
just right,
That's a
like,
huge
very
experience.
huge experience, and I
Yeah.
so those are those are the moments that I think really shaped me, right? Like, having exposure at a very young age to incredibly smart, visionary folks who were building, Rainbow was, part of the cable industry, and cable was still so brand new, right? And so there was an ability or an opportunity for me to have exposure that the average 20 something coming out of college doesn't always necessarily have, because you're a junior person in a big corporation and you don't get that exposure. And so I really was intentional about learning and soaking it in as much as I could. It was also clear to me that I wanted to learn and grow and be a leader of some kind. I didn't know what that meant necessarily, but that was always, I used to say, I don't want to do the grunt work forever. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to do this grunt work for I'm gonna do this now, but I'm not doing this forever. Like, this is not my calling.
Totally.
And from there I went to Showtime, and then I went to HBO, and HBO was another incredible turning point. It was the first time I reported to a person of color. I had a female African American woman who was my boss, and she was incredible. It's a mentor to this day. And I remember leaving a meeting, and I've always been, somewhat, not somewhat, I've always been an introvert, right? And so I'm not necessarily one to just be in a meeting and just talking for the sake of talking. Like, I'm not going to take up the oxygen in the room. I'm going to speak if I have something profound to say. And other than that, I'm not really speaking. And so we left a meeting, and she said to me later, the next time we're in a meeting, you need to speak up, like, so they see you.
Good for her.
And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, you were there." So I'm thinking I'm letting my boss speak. And she was like, "No, no, no." And so here was all of that training I had from my early years. And then I got into this bigger company kind of environment, and became intimidated, which was kind of interesting, right? I had always been in these smaller environments. And so now I needed to learn how to navigate a bigger environment, a bigger company. And so, just step by step, just understanding where my value is, but always having great mentors, always having people who encouraged me, always having people who saw me
Yeah.
and who wanted me to evolve and grow. When I left HBO, I was a stay-at-home mom-ish, if you will, for a bit. I had a film fund
Oh, I didn't know that.
with a couple of friends, Gabrielle and Yolanda. It was called Triple Threat Films, and we raised some money. We produced some films, and
Like what films? Let's talk about it.
we produced the Sebastian Telfair story, which was acquired by we executive produced. We didn't produce. We raised the funding, so all of it was always like raising funding, and that was an incredible documentary. If you're not familiar with the story, it's a great story because Sebastian Telfair was on his way to announce what college he was going to go to, and that was the premise of the documentary, was to follow him his senior year of high school and his announcement of choosing college. And instead, he decided he was going to enter the draft. And he became and he was drafted and became a New York Knick. And so it was, like one of those like amazing, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be really dramatic. And so ESPN picked it up, and acquired it. Another one was a narrative, Dirty Laundry, which was picked up by BET, and a comedy, and so many lessons learned through that process. But a new director, and that was an incredible time, just working with a team of people who were like new to doing everything we were doing, if you will, right? So from the director to the producers to the funding sourcing and so forth. And then the third film, we raised the money, and then the filmmaker decided not. I don't want to disclose because he
Yeah.
decided not to make the film. But yeah, it was great, and I guess it was over the span of about 4 years or so.
It's so funny that you call yourself a stay-at-home mom, but you're like, "But simultaneously, I was raising money and we had a film fund." It's like,
Well,
what
because it's so funny because I really, I left HBO to spend time with my kids, and I will say I went from feeling like I was working around the clock, like
Yeah,
literally, right? Like it's what I always say to moms now is, technology just wasn't what technology is now, right? So I didn't feel like I had a
the
choice, right? Like I
flexibility.
was like, exactly. Didn't have the flexibility. I was leaving before the girls were awake in the morning, and Haley was like literally like 4 months. I went back from maternity leave early both
Same.
times.
Yeah,
And it's like it was tough. So to me, the fact that I could be home for dinner every night, and like I could make dinner. Oh my gosh, like the fact that I could do those things and do pickup and join the PTA and blah 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 was like, yeah, it felt like I was a stay-at-home mom compared to the where I was trying to navigate it before.
yeah. And how old
Uh
were the girls when you decided to take that time to be with them?
Very young, very, very young. I mean, Haley, it was really after, I was came home early. I mean, I came back to work, sorry, early from maternity leave.
Yeah.
Um, I remember it distinctly. I was at a lunch, and I got a call from my then nanny, the one we had before Mariana, and Haley was, like, 4 months, so Alexa was 2. They were exactly 2 years apart, almost to the day. And she's in the doctor's office. I can hear them both crying.
Oh, no.
She's trying to explain to me what's going on in fairly broken English. We hired a Spanish speaking nanny so our children would learn Spanish, but the downside of that is I don't speak Spanish, right? So like
Yeah.
um and it was that day that I was like I'm at the wrong place. I'm at this luncheon about what was an incredible film called Real Women Have Curves. I remember it, like,
Oh, yeah, I
vividly.
remember that film. Yeah.
And, they call it remember it had the big phone, those big phones. I stepped outside, and it literally, like, that day, I just said, "This I'm at the wrong place. I'm at the wrong place, wrong time, like, this film will go on without me, and I should have been there with my babysitter who's doing everything she can to take care of my kids." Yeah, that was, like, the turning point. So, yeah, I mean, Haley just shy of turning 1. So it took several months for me to, get
Yeah.
get myself out of there, but, just shy of turning 1 when I left, and she was 5 when I went back. And
Wow. And did you find it difficult to go back after stepping out?
I did. I did, but I found it difficult for 2 reasons. My kids had gotten used to me being home,
Mm. Mhm.
and so I remember Haley would say to me, "So when's this project over?" Like, when I started the job, "When's this project over, mom?" And I was like, "It's not a project, like, mommy's going to work every
Sweet
day."
girl.
And when I would travel, they would write me the most heart-wrenching notes.
Oh god.
"Mommy, I don't like when you're not here. This is really hard. This is really
Oh,
sad." Like, "Where what?"
oh no.
Um, but I also found it hard it was hard. It took me a minute to find, a job, and the things that people would ask, they'd say, "Well, are you sure you're ready to work again? And how do you know if you're gonna take this job that you can do it? And like, how do you know?" Like, it was crazy, the questions
It's so weird. Yeah. It's not questions they ask of men.
at all.
Yeah.
So it was hard, but it was, and I went to work for a digital company, and I had never worked in a digital space. I went to work for Interactive One, and I was employee number 5, so it was a startup, and so, all the work that goes into, a startup. But, it was hard, but I was excited to be back, um, and I also thought, I thought, it was good for my kids to see me, it was like the fact that they thought, 'cause because when I was doing the film stuff, I was like, "Oh, it's just I have to just go and have this meeting and I'll be back in a couple of hours," right? Like, or, it wasn't quite the same as, "No, I'm gone and I'll be home hopefully for dinner."
Yeah. It's interesting. I have this dear friend, Alexa Von Tobel, and she says to her children, Mommy gets to go to work today. And she shows her joy around the sort and it's authentic joy. She loves what she does. So she shows her children her joy. And she was like, because one day I want my kids to want to work and to enjoy their work. And so it's really interesting because I think sometimes we feel that mom guilt and the kids can feel that mom guilt, but she's kind of flipped it. She's actually says to her kids, "Oh, mommy's excited. I'm going on a business trip. This is what I get to go do."
I love that. And I was listening to a podcast once and I heard that life hack of turn got to into get to.
Yeah,
Instead of I got to go to work, I get to go to work. Or
exactly.
yeah, I love that.
So, a couple things I want to touch on. First of all, you mentioned a dark night of the soul. You said you didn't go through it with Warner, but you have been through one.
It's so interesting, like the timing, like the point at which you're asking that question based on what I was just describing as far as my career. The company I went to was this company, Interactive One. I left there, having just gone through a really tough divorce,
Mm,
coming out of a pretty bad scenario and then a really tough, divorce process, and thinking I was gonna go to one company. There were, some issues around that. There was just a lot of change, like a lot of change. We moved from the suburbs back into the city.
mm,
My kids were, like middle school
mm,
age,
mhm.
and, 2 girls, middle school, single mom, like just
Wow.
trying to like figure it all out. And I just remember feeling, lost, confused, and there were days when I just felt like I can't get out of bed. Like I just can't. This is so hard. This is so confusing. This is so hard. And that was the time. That was the and I lost so much weight. I remember a friend saying to me, "Are you okay? You've lost so much weight." And, I don't think I realized that I wasn't eating,
Yeah.
right? But, like, so I don't know. I mean, I was feeding my children and then just not eating. It was just very bizarre. But a therapist said to me, "You're going through a dark night of the soul, and you just have to let yourself go through it in order to, um, find your strength again and define your goes back to, the beginning, right? You're defining yourself. Like I was defined as a wife and a this and a that, right? And all those things were like, and one of the first people in my family to get divorced. And what does that mean? And the label of that. And, how do you evolve from that? And the wounds of why I got divorced and all of those things, right? So that was the time. And I ultimately took a job with Comcast, and my married name was Maria Weaver Watson, and I went into Comcast as Maria Weaver, and my ex-husband and I had known each other since we were teenagers. We met in Martha's Vineyard when we were little,
Yeah.
and, we were 14, and so people that knew me from the moment I entered, we started dating, I was 19. So people that knew me in all parts of my career knew me with him. So this was the first time I was, like, in a job, in a place where nobody even knew who he was, and nobody even knew my last name was Watson, and I walked in as Maria Weaver, and it just gave me so much empowerment and strength and, it gave me an opportunity to really, like, redefine myself
Mm.
and get my, I had been working my way up in my career throughout, but to get my confidence, to, like, really believe that I could, uh, do anything, right? Like, I needed to feel that way in order to, and not only in order to be successful in my career, but to show up for my girls the way I wanted to. And it was in that role that, I really started, saying to people, I want to evolve from this, which I was a CMO, to being a GM, being president of a division. Like I want to run a P&L. And I just articulated it. I just started telling people. And I didn't tell a lot of people, but I just like put it out there. And so someone was at a lunch, just bringing full circle to your original question. Someone was at a lunch and there was a job and it was the role at Warner. And she knew that that was something that was of interest to me. And she said, I have the perfect person for you to like, that you have to speak to Maria Weaver. But I think it was knowing that that was important to me, right? Knowing that that was something I wanted to do and being intentional about it versus just letting things kinda happen. But I don't know that I could have evolved to doing the role or doing any of this if I hadn't gone through that dark night of the soul.
Yeah. What did the dark night of the soul do for you? What did that process do for you?
Well, I think for one thing, I think it helped me understand, gosh, it's so many different things, right? Like, I think what I've learned from it was not to try to control every single thing. It's how I built my spirituality. It's when I started to really meditate. I had been meditating here and there, but during that process, I was meditating twice a day, every day. I would put stickies on my door that I was meditating. I could hear my daughter, she's meditating again. She's meditating. We can't
Right.
go in there. She's meditating again.
Amazing.
It's when I started beading, right? And that's
That's
XO, the
interesting.
evolution of XO Maria Louise, right? It was not that was not my plan or thought or process. I started beading and just trying to learn as much as I could about grounding myself. And I was working with a therapist then who was in California, so it was all on the phone. We didn't even have Zoom. And she was incredible. We would start each session with a prayer. And yeah, I learned, I guess I more than anything, I learned tools, right? Like I learned coping tools, and I learned to trust my intuition, and to I learned that, I was stronger than I thought. But I say all that and will tell you though, when I left Warner, I needed to go through the reminders.
You had to go back to that tool bag.
I had to go back to that tool bag, and I worked with this incredible woman named Nisha. She's a wellness therapist, wellness coach, wellness spiritual leader, if you will. And it wasn't as painful of a process as before, right? Because but I did need some reminders because I do think when you're in those jobs, you kind of, you get back on that treadmill and you get back into the patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can relate so much to what you're describing in terms of the dark night of the soul and what it gave me. I don't think I ever realized that that's where my spirituality came, but it absolutely is. That's where it came from that moment. Because there was like this total stripping away and death of self that you just can't deny. And it somehow connects you to everyone and everything. But it takes a while to get there. And it's so friggin' painful when you're in it.
And how long did yours last?
I mean, I'm still on the tail end of it, to be honest, but I would say it was, gosh, 3 years,
Mhm,
and super, super painful, and the more I would try and hang on to the old self,
mhm.
the more it would just, like, show up and get even darker, and so it was It was hard, it was super rough,
Mm,
but you're also saying something that I think is important to highlight here, Maria, and I say this all the time when I'm working with people that are trying to figure out what to do with their lives, or they know, but they're not articulating it. Knowing what you want and saying it out loud is the key.
mhm,
Words matter. And the fact that you were so clear with your intent, you're like, "This is what I want. I'm ready to own a P&L. I want to own a division. I wanna be a president." The fact that you said those things out loud let others show up for you.
mhm, 100%.
So no matter how small the want or how big the want, just saying it out loud
Yeah,
is important.
yeah,
And letting I always say to others, "Let your intentions be known." Like,
right,
operate with your hands above the table.
that's
Just say
right.
it out loud. You don't have to be secretive about your ambitions. There's nothing wrong with your wants. Just say them out loud, and others it gives others the chance to win and to show up for you in that way.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
for whatever reason, that can be really hard to do. And I think that when I was in the dark night of the soul, my wants were unclear in the beginning of it. So I was sending out all these mixed signals, like, "Oh, I wanna be my old self, and I wanna be CMO of a large company." "Well, no, I actually wanna be CEO of a mid-sized company." "Well, no, actually, I wanna adventure all over the world." "No, well, actually." And so it was just like I was all over the map. So what was coming at me was all over the map because I was unclear. But the fact that you were so clear, it delivered.
it did, it did. But this next process, I was less clear. Right, I mean, I was clear then, right? But this process, I think that's what you and I bonded over, right? Was that, I think I wanna, be CEO of, this size company, or, I would describe, I want to do something that allows me to be creative, and, I think you are going through a process of it almost feels too open-ended, right? Because people are like, "Well, what do you wanna do? You can do anything," right? And so you're like you just start with this list of all these different things
Yeah,
versus, um
yeah. I have a friend that runs an incubator here. He was like, "Carly, you need a constraint." He's like, "'Cause you can do anything, you just need a constraint. You need to, like" and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I absolutely do." But, okay, so when I met you, you were kind of slightly ahead of me on the journey. You were about to launch XO, your beautiful, beaded bracelets that are gorgeous, your gemstone
Thank
bracelet.
you.
And then recently we got news that you're now stepping into this role. So talk to us a little bit about this process. You said this process was harder because you were putting out mixed signals. Are you still putting out
Well,
mixed signals? Did you get focused? Where are you now?
I think the reality is I couldn't really articulate if someone had said to me, "Do you wanna be an investment banker?" I would have just laughed out loud, like, mouth open kinda laugh, right? But ultimately, this role, this opportunity is exactly what I wanted to be doing. I just didn't know how I didn't know how to really say that, right? Like, you know, I launched XO and it has been so gratifying from a creative process, right? And I'll just quickly tell you that part of how I and why I launched XO was I was all over the map and I was speaking with a friend, confidant, colleague, who has done 4 exits, and so he's just someone who I, highly respect, and he said to me, "Oh, you should go create this AI content thing," and I was like, "Oh, I don't know." He said, "Well, then what do you wanna do?" And I said, "If I could do anything, I would go ahead and launch my do something with my bracelets." And he's like, "Well, then you should. Then that's what you should do. The fact that you said it out loud, that's exactly what you should do." And it was probably the first time that anyone had validated, "Oh, that's maybe something you should do." And so, as I said, I had this list. I want something creative. I want to do something, be around founders. I want to be a founder. I want to do something that's strategic but I want to run something, right? Like it was all these like things. I would say to people, "Oh, I want to run," you said a mid-size company. "Oh, I want to run a company 100 million-ish kind of da da da," and then like help it exit and grow and all these things, right? So, yeah, it was mixed signals, but it was also like I just didn't even really know how to articulate what the things are that I really enjoy. And so I launched XO, and it definitely has been, um so gratifying on so many levels, right? Like like I said, the creative part, but I get to roll up my sleeves and do things in social that I haven't been able to do before and learn AI in a different way because I need to learn AI because I'm one person, can't do it all, right? Like all of that has been like really fulfilling. And I love the stories like people share with me about the bracelets. I mean, it's just like the warmest, heartfelt, someone's like, "Oh, I look at this bracelet, it reminds me of a garnet that my dad gave me when I was little." Like just and people will just share. And so I love all of that. And I love being around all of these founders, right? Like it thrusts me into this world because the founder community is probably the most open community I have ever been around, right? Like it doesn't matter. Like someone's making pesto and someone's making clothing and someone's doing jewelry, right? Everyone's still sharing ideas about how they're getting to market, what's happening for them with tariffs or how they're get their supply chain or everything. I mean, it's the most sharing community. But there was a part of me that still was missing. Um, Kind of the world I had been in for my whole career, right? Music and entertainment and TV and film and media. And so I advised a couple of businesses and someone suggested I speak to a friend who, loosely a friend, I should say. I know his wife and we had met a couple of times, but he wasn't quite a friend, but who worked at this investment bank, maybe to get some connections to PE firms for boards and other things like that. And it was in chatting with him that he said, maybe you should think about being a senior advisor here. We need sector expert in music. We have one, we don't really have a lot of depth in that space. Tons of people in media, like we can always use more depth around that. And, we're always bringing on sector experts as senior advisors. And I said, that's interesting. Okay. I just didn't know a lot. And so after being a senior advisor, so I said yes. I met with them and really liked the founder. I liked the partners. And I was at an offsite and I was like, these folks are just so warm and nice and giving. And the energy was great. But the whole organization is really built around this notion that it's not just bankers, it's bankers with sector experts. And so even the managing directors, there are a lot of managing directors that are sector experts because as an operator, you understand how to run the business and what's going on. So if you're trying to advise someone on how to sell their business or how to scale their business, having been in their shoes, you're having a different conversation than from a purely outsider in kind of perspective. And that really resonated for me as well. And so when the opportunity presented itself, someone was leaving, a managing director was leaving to go become CEO. Um, as I said, I like to raise my hand. I say, yes, let's, this is, this is exactly right. It allows me to be with founders and it allows me to be entrenched again into the media and music space and AI and what's happening and use my strategic skills and the understanding of the marketplace and where things are evolving and going and at the same time coming from a place of how can I help you, right? Like I love that I can come from a place of what do you need, how can I help you? Are you if you're a founder, um let's think through what would an exit look like, what's important to you. If you're a big business, how are you thinking about scaling? Maybe we help you find a company to acquire. It's it's just so empowering, like from a conversation standpoint versus like being in music, like, what are you going to do for me, like it's that right complete opposite, right? Like every conversation I start with like how can I help you. And so it's exactly right, right? Like a lot of times I'm working with founders who are 100 million under, right? I'm just not I'm not operating it, right? Like I'm not operating the business. And so what I realized that I don't need to be in control, right? Like I'm not a control freak, right? So I don't need to operate your business, but I want to be a part of that process and I want to be a part of your evolution. And so it's amazing. And I really do enjoy the company. I enjoy the team. One thing, I've learned over the years is how important it is to work with people you wanna work with.
Yeah.
And when you get to a place in your career where you can, like, do that, I mean, I had the pleasure of working with them as a senior advisor, being on all the calls and being at meetings every Monday and seeing how they operate before joining, which, most people don't normally get a chance to do that, and, um, just the camaraderie and the support. I was like, this is a great place to be. So it's been really great. I mean, it's still very new, but the conversations I'm having just feel gratifying and exciting. And it's nice to hear the excitement from other people when we're chatting about like the art of possibility, if you will.
Yeah.
And and I still get to do XO.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a couple things that I just want to highlight about your journey. So I want to say that it's lovely to have a fellow introvert on. So, so I too, believe it or not, am an introvert. People typically don't believe that because they don't understand the definition of introvert extrovert. But read the book Quiet, and you'll get it.
I have.
Yeah. And so I think there is real beauty in the introvert that's willing to raise her hand.
Mhm.
Somebody who listens more than they speak. Someone who's focused on building relationships. Somebody who's ambitious, but with a heart of service. And I think that this next chapter I find very inspiring for me. Like, I'm watching you closely, and I love what you're doing, and I'm so excited for you. So
I appreciate
congratulations, you found it.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels right. It feels very good, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Okay, so before we wrap, a couple things. If people are interested in the EXO bracelets, where do they find them?
So, website is xomarialouise.com.
Okay, and we'll
XO
put
Maria
that in the
Louise.
show notes as well so that people
Okay,
can access it. We'll put it in social. And then
great.
what's your hope and wish for the world, Maria? Now that you're here at this point, what do you want next?
The we didn't talk politics at all, which I think is rightfully so, but I think it's, we're in a challenging time and space. In the entertainment space, I mean, the job market is not great, at all, and, seeing what's happening for a lot of Black female executives is really disheartening. It actually was a big part of my wanting to go back in and having a seat at the table. Like, it felt really important to me during this time period. And so, my wish and my hope is that people who can, um, will and should continue to elevate and make space for women to grow and evolve, and people of color to grow and evolve, and that we don't lose hope during this time, right? That we, um, don't allow exhaustion to get in the way of the mission. I think about my 2 daughters, and so my hope and my wish is that they're in a scenario where they're seen as equal contributors to their companies, to their business, that they get to pursue a career with ambition and hope and without feeling any limitation, at all, and they don't feel limited by their color or their gender. Like, that is really my hope and my wish. And if I can play a small role in that, whether it be by inspiring people or making space, then I always want to do that.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, how I'm translating that for me and myself is now is not the time to retreat.
It's not.
And for those of us that are in positions and have platforms to eliminate roadblocks and continue to elevate people of color, women, people that are underrepresented in leadership,
100%.
we need to continue to open those doors, just like people did
100%.
for us.
100%.
Maria, thank you so much.
Thank you for
I'm
having
so
me.
I'm so excited for you, and I can't wait to hear more about the businesses that you're working with and on, and
Thank you.
watch closely and to order more bracelets for Christmas.
Yes, yes.
Um,
'Tis the season.
yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. I
Thanks,
appreciate you.
Carla. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's been a really fun conversation, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you creating this platform and giving space.
Yeah,
It's important. So
we
thank
need
you.
more people and leaders like you. That's the whole goal.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for listening today. If you're so inclined, please follow, subscribe, download, share, all of the things so that we can keep going. We appreciate your support so much. If you're interested in learning more, go to thecoeffect.co.